a rejected strategist mate, a ruthless rival alpha, and a war that proves the weak wolf was the most dangerous mind in the room. He humiliated his fated mate before the pack. But a rival alpha claimed her before she hit the ground. They said the moon didn't make wolves in pairs so much as in fractures. Long before there were packs or titles or war councils, the goddess was alone in the sky. To fix that ache, she took a shard of her own light, broke it in two, and hurled the pieces down into the world. Each piece sank into a mortal soul. Half here, half there. Two hearts, permanently off balance until they collided again. For a wolf, that missing half was everything. The constant, low-grade hunger under the rage. The quiet ache underneath every victory, every night run, every solitary dawn. Maera grew up on that story. She clung to it when the hall around her jeered at her silence. The Ironfang Great Hall was thick with smoke and roasted meat, torches throwing gold light over rough stone and scarred beams. Wolves shouted over each other, tankards slammed, chairs scraped. It all washed around Maera like a river around a stone. She stood at the far end of the long strategy table, fingers pressed into a stained map. Inked forests, jagged mountains, the twisting blue of the river Tharn. Her gaze snagged on a patrol route marked in dark charcoal. Southridge, shift change, 8 minutes uncovered. Her wolf paced tight circles in her chest. Say it. Move your mouth. Just tell them they're vulnerable there. Her throat locked. Little Mouse found something to stare at again. A syrupy voice crooned behind her. Maera's shoulders tightened. She didn't look up. She didn't have to. The cloying floral perfume hit her nose a second later. Lyra, daughter of Gamma Rorik. Pretty, cruel, bored. Maera curled her fingers to hide their tremor. Just studying the rotations, she managed. Lyra laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. Studying. That's all you ever do, isn't it? You watch real wolves while they actually fight. A few nearby warriors snorted, not daring to laugh too loud in case an elder heard. They didn't need to. Maera felt every smirk like a shove between her shoulders. She kept her eyes on the map. To be seen was to be targeted. To be clever in a pack that worshipped teeth and claws over tactics was to be dangerous in the wrong way. After her father died, she'd learned that fast. Theron, Ironfang's last battle strategist, had been respected, feared even. Then he was a name no one said, a cautionary tale tucked behind tight mouths and tighter shoulders. One raid gone wrong, one body that never made it home. And Maera and her mother had gone from respected family to charity cases overnight. Her mind still saw patterns. Her tongue no longer dared to name them. Lyra leaned closer, her perfume punching through the hall's smoke. Don't worry, Mouse. Once the Moonbond Rite is done, you won't have to lurk around maps anymore. You'll be Kael's quiet little shadow. Maera's heart lurched so hard it hurt. Kael, son of Alpha Darius, future head of Ironfang, her fated mate, the other half of her soul. At least, that's what the scent pull between them whispered every time he walked into a room. Maera swallowed, flicking a glance toward the raised dais. Kael stood apart from the worst of the drunken boasting, leaning against a pillar in easy conversation with a knot of warriors his age. Dark hair, strong jaw, laugh as smooth and effortless as the rest of him. He hadn't looked at her once tonight. After the rite, she reminded herself, when the moon is high and the goddess calls, he'll have no choice but to see you. The bond will lock. You'll matter. Your mind will matter. The story of the goddess's halves had to mean something. It had to, because if the rite didn't fix everything. Nothing would. The Moonbond banners had already been hung. Silver cloth draped the hall's thick stone pillars, each one painted with a different phase of the moon. Wolves moved through the controlled chaos of preparation. Elders arguing about ceremony order. Omegas hauling in fresh torches. Warriors polishing armor they wouldn't technically need for a ritual, but refused to appear without. The rite happened once every 5 years, on the highest full moon. Packs could petition to attend from neighboring territories. Old grudges were laid aside. On paper, if not in hearts, for the goddess's sake. This year, Ironfang had invited Nightfall. Maera hadn't asked why. Strategically, it made sense. Nightfall guarded the western borders and controlled 2 crucial mountain passes. Ironfang needed their friendship on record for the High Council. Emotionally, nobody wanted the Pack of Shadows here. Nightfall wolves had a reputation. They didn't roar. They watched. They vanished. They won. Maera adjusted the simple dress her mother had sewn by lamplight, fingers snagging on a frayed thread at her hip. It wasn't flashy like Lyra's crimson silk, but it was well made, clean, presentable, good enough to stand beside an Alpha's son. Her wolf whined. She caught her reflection in a polished shield hung by the door. Slight, silver-brown hair, braided back, eyes too big for her thin face. She didn't look like a Luna. She looked like exactly what the Pack called her, a mouse that had learned to walk on 2 legs. Maera, her mother's voice, was a soft touch on raw skin. Ailey fussed with the shoulders of Maera's dress, then cupped her cheeks, thumbs brushing away a sheen of nervous sweat. The lines around her eyes had deepened in the last 5 years. Stress, loss, keeping them both alive and invisible. "You'll do fine," Ellie murmured. "The goddess does not make mistakes." Maera wanted to believe that. The goddess didn't have to live here, she muttered, before she could stop herself. Her mother's mouth twitched. Half reprimand, half reluctant agreement. "She gave you your father's mind. That was no accident either. Don't let fear make you small tonight." "I'm always small," Maera said. But the memory of Theron bent over maps, explaining supply lines in a patient rumble, warmed her chest. He'd never treated her as less because she was quiet. He'd called it an advantage. "Wolves underestimate the ones who listen," he'd once told her. "If you can listen and think, you win before the first claw is thrown." A deep horn blared from the courtyard. "They're here!" someone shouted. Nightfall. The hall's noise dipped, then spiked again in a different register. Sharp, excited, nervous. Wolves surged toward the doors, eager to glimpse the rival Alpha, whose name came whispered in war reports and cautionary tales. Maera's feet moved before her. Fear could grab them. She slipped along the wall, sliding into the crowd's wake, the smell of Ironfang fur thinning as unfamiliar scents rolled in. Pine sap, cold stone, snowfall on bare rock. The Nightfall wolves entered like they were stepping into a forest, not a rival's hall. Quiet, measured, no wasted motion. At their head walked Alpha Draven. He was taller than Kael, broader through the shoulders, his dark hair tied back at the nape of his neck. His eyes, God's, his eyes, were a molten gold that swept the room in one slow, assessing pass. "Predator," her wolf whispered, not in fear, but in recognition of another creature who'd learned to think before he struck. Draven's gaze passed over her and moved on. Of course it did. To him, she was just another Ironfang body cluttering the stone. After tonight, she reminded herself, after the rite, you won't be clutter. You'll be Kael's Luna. You'll have a voice. You'll earn a place at that war table again. She hugged that hope like armor, as the elders called everyone to order. By the time the moon had clawed its way high enough to flood the hall's central circle with silver light, Maera's muscles ached from standing perfectly still. Deep breaths, Ellie had whispered, before being shepherded to the benches reserved for parents of those named in the rite. Maera stood alone in the ring of single wolves, each of them stripped of weapons, dressed in simple white or gray. The stone beneath her bare feet was cold enough to bite. The air hummed with nerves and scent and spiritual static. The lead elder's wolf mask glowed faintly in the torchlight as she lifted her staff. "Tonight we stand before the goddess," she intoned. "Tonight we offer our throats to her choice. Her will shall bind what was broken and reveal what was hidden." Maera's heart hammered, loud enough she was certain everyone could hear it. Across the circle, Kael looked bored. He rolled his shoulders under a meticulously tailored tunic, casting a quick glance toward the Nightfall delegation. Lyra stood just behind him, not part of the named circle, but close enough to pretend she belonged there. Her eyes kept flicking toward Kael's profile, calculating and hungry. Maera swallowed hard. The elder began to read from the list. Names echoed, each followed by a subtle ripple of magic as the goddess's mark brushed through the air, tugging souls into place. A few wolves gasped as the bond snapped tight between them. Others looked relieved. A handful looked resigned. None of them were Maera. Her wolf paced harder. "She's getting closer. We can feel it. Kael smells like home. He's ours." "Kael, son of Darius of Ironfang," the elder called at last. The hall held its breath. Kael straightened, every inch the future alpha, chin high, jaw set. The moonlight licked his features, throwing the sharp lines into knife edges. "Step forward," the elder said. He did. "Maera, daughter of Theron." The name hit Maera like a physical shove. Her body moved on instinct, feet carrying her to the center of the circle. The bond hum surged between them, a low, electric whine that climbed to a sharp, dizzying pitch. He smelled like pine smoke and steel, and every nervous daydream she'd had since she was 16. This close, there was no mistaking it. Her wolf went still and sure. There, him, ours. The elder smiled, some genuine warmth breaking through her ceremonial gravity. "The goddess has—" "Stop." The word cut across the hall like a blade. Every hair on Maera's body rose. The hum of the forming bond stuttered, then flared in panicked protest. Kael's jaw had tightened. He stared down at Maera, expression unreadable, then turned his gaze deliberately to the Nightfall wolves, to his watching father, to the assembled elders. "I won't," he said. Silence slammed into the room. The elder's staff lowered a fraction. "You will not." "What, Kael?" "I will not accept this match." His voice carried, cold and precise. "I reject the bond." The world lurched. Maera's wolf howled in her chest, a broken, desperate sound only she could hear. The half-formed bond between them spasmed like a dying thing. "You do not speak over the goddess," the elder hissed, mask trembling with fury. Kael stepped back, as if he couldn't stand the feel of her this close. His eyes finally landed on her face, and there was no reluctant affection there, no apology, just calculation, just disdain. "I speak for my pack," he said. "An Ironfang deserves a Luna who isn't weak, hiding behind maps, shaking at her own shadow. I won't bind my bloodline to a coward's daughter." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Somewhere to Maera's left, Lyra made a little sound, delighted and vicious. Her wolf keened. Her knees buckled. The bond snapped. It wasn't a clean cut. It tore. White pain roared through her, blinding, deafening. The half of her that had just reached out toward him was ripped away and flung into a void so cold she forgot how to breathe. She hit the stone. The hall gasped as one organism. The sound, huge and ugly. Whispers hissed at the edges of her fading vision. Rejected, wolfless, moon-cursed. Somewhere above her, Alpha Darius shouted. Elders argued. Someone snarled about blasphemy. The goddess's magic crackled in the air, furious and offended, but all of that went thin and far away. Maera lay on the cold floor and tried to remember how to hold herself together. Draven of Nightfall heard the bond break. It was subtle. No one without an alpha's spiritual sense would have caught it. But to him, it was as loud as a snapped neck. 1 second, the mate thread between Ironfang's air and the small, sharp-eyed girl in the circle hummed with tentative, newborn energy. The next, Kael's rejection sliced it open. The backlash tore across the hall in a wave. Most wolves only felt a prickle. Draven felt the void. He had been raised on the same goddess stories as everyone else. But alpha training added a darker footnote. A broken bond doesn't just disappear. It leaves a wound like a missing limb in the spirit. And a wound demands to be filled. Draven's wolf surged toward that emptiness so violently he had to lock his jaw to keep from flinching. There, the beast snarled. There, there. He tracked the sensation to the girl on the floor. She was smaller than the others, yes, but not fragile. Even curled around her own agony, he saw hints of something tougher. Tight-corded muscle in her forearms, calluses on her fingers. Map reader's hands, ink-stained and disciplined. Her face, pale with shock, still held that same thoughtful focus he'd noticed when they'd first entered, and she'd stood half-hidden by the strategy table. The scent of her pain hit him like frost smoke, ash and river water, quiet grief, caged fury. His wolf went still, then roared. Mine. Draven's hand clenched around the back of the bench. No, he muttered under his breath. This was ridiculous, reckless, politically suicidal. Ironfang's heir had just spat in the goddess's face in front of Nightfall's delegation and half the damn region. The High Council would demand a hearing. Alliances would be re-evaluated. Pacts would whisper. Nightfall needed to come out of this looking steady, controlled, not like opportunistic vultures circling a wounded mate. Across the hall, Kael lifted his chin, doubling down. I will take a mate who strengthens us, he declared, not one whose father got half our warriors killed and who hides from her own wolf. Something hot and ugly punched through Draven's chest. He had heard Theron's name. The stories didn't match Kael's contempt. Strategist, loyal, dead on a mission Ironfang had no business leading. Draven's wolf pressed hard against his ribs. He throws her away. He tears the goddess's work and leaves it bleeding on the floor. Take her. Fix it. This is Ironfang business. Darius snapped at the elders, trying to drag the focus back to his own. Authority. We will settle it at home. Wrong. The Nightfall beta, Sarah, muttered at Draven's side. He just made it everyone's business. Draven's mind ran the angles with brutal speed. If he acted, every eye in the valley would be on him. The council would see it as provocation at best, territory theft at worst. He could start a war with one decision. He could also win it. Kael had given him a gift, a powerful wolf of strategic breeding. Rejected publicly, her goddess-touched bond ripped wide open. Leaving her here would be like leaving a fresh carcass in a field of starving dogs. Marcus of Bloodpine would come sniffing around. So would the others. Ironfang themselves might decide the easiest way to solve The blasphemy was to kill the rejected mate and pretend the rite had misfired. His wolf snarled. "Over my corpse." The elder was still sputtering about sacrilege when Draven stood. The hall went so quiet he could hear the torches hiss. He stepped down from the nightfall bench, ignoring every shocked stare that tracked his progress. Sarah swore under her breath, but fell into place half a step behind him, ready for whatever came. He crossed the circle. Maera lay on her side, one hand clawed into the stone, the other pressed over her heart as if she could physically hold it in. Her eyes were unfocused, breath coming in short, brutal gasps. Up close, the scent of that torn bond was almost unbearable. Draven dropped to one knee, her gaze jerked to his face, dazed and disbelieving. The void where her bond had been yawned between them like a cliff edge. He put his mouth close to her ear, his voice pitched for her and the goddess alone. "You were not thrown away," he said quietly. "You were delivered." Then, louder, for everyone, letting his alpha power roll out like a storm. "I, Draven of Nightfall, claim this wolf." Before anyone could move, before she could flinch, he bent his head and sank his teeth into the tense, vulnerable skin between her neck and shoulder. The world exploded. The first mark had been a tentative brush, a forming thread reaching for Kael's soul. This was nothing like that. Draven's teeth broke skin and dropped fire directly into the void in Maera's chest. Her back arched. A raw sound tore out of her throat, half sob, half something wild and wordless. The pain wasn't gone. It never could be. But it was no longer a hollow, sucking wound. It was a cracked basin being flooded, filled with something fierce and hot and refusing to let her break. His scent slammed into her. Pine, stone, cold night air over deep water, and something darker underneath that tasted like old secrets and older battles. The bond snapped into place between them with a force that rattled her bones. "Mate." Her wolf screamed the word, not with confusion, but with savage, stunned relief. A roar ripped through the hall. "What do you think you're doing?" Alpha Darius bellowed, surging to his feet. Draven lifted, his head, lips bloody, eyes blazing molten gold. His hand slid under Maera's shoulders, pulling her up against his chest as if she weighed nothing. His mark burned, the heat of it spreading out in slow, insistent pulses. "Correcting your son's mistake," Draven said, voice like broken ice. "The goddess made a bond." He spat on it. "I will not leave her unclaimed and half dead on your floor for scavengers." "She is Ironfang," Darius snarled. "She was." Draven's power flared harder, meeting Darius's head-on. "Your heir severed that tie in front of witnesses, in front of me. You threw away what the goddess gave you. Nightfall does not waste gifts." He pushed to his feet, with Maera still cradled in his arms. Chaos detonated. Several Ironfang warriors lunged, instincts overriding whatever political sense they had. Nightfall wolves moved like shadows, flowing between Draven and the oncoming bodies, claws flashing, steel singing as they drew blades that weren't supposed to be in a ceremonial hall. "Enough!" The elder slammed her staff down, power cracking through the air like thunder. Lesser wolves flinched back. Alphas held their ground. "This rite is already on the edge of blasphemy," she hissed. "Do you dare spill blood under the moon's eye?" "Your boy already did," Sarah muttered. Maera clung to Draven's tunic, breath starting to come in shallow, ragged pulls as her mind tried to catch up with what her soul had already accepted. She'd gone from nothing to claimed in the space of a heartbeat. "Put her down," Kael snapped, stepping into the circle again, cheeks flushed with more than embarrassment now. "You can't just take what is ours. The heat of humiliation rolled off him, acrid and choking. She is not a sword you dropped in the mud, Draven said. She is a living wolf. You abandoned her. You named her weak and unworthy in front of the goddess. The bond shattered because you broke it. If you try to touch her again, I will take your hand. His wolf pushed through the last word, voice fracturing into a low, inhuman growl. For one brief, stunned second, Maera felt something else underneath the Alpha's fury. Fear, not of Darius, not of Kael, fear of losing her. That made no sense. He didn't know her. He'd barely looked at her until tonight. And yet, the bond between them pulsed, answering his threat with its own burgeoning protectiveness. Nightfall will leave with what is mine, Draven said, not taking his eyes off Ironfang's Alpha. If the High Council has questions, they can send them to my border. You know where to find it. You've tried to cross it enough times. Draven, the elder started. The rite is already corrupted, he cut in. I'm salvaging what I can. Then he shifted. One moment, Maera was in the arms of a man. The next, she was clinging to the thick fur of a massive black werewolf, her legs held firmly in place by his shoulders as he lunged for the open doors. Nightfall wolves flowed after him, a living tide. Ironfang howled and surged, but the elder's power smashed down again. Some instinct in even the angriest warriors refusing to spill blood during the goddess's call. By the time someone found the nerve to disobey, Draven and his pack were a streak of shadow, vanishing into the silver-washed trees. Maera's last glimpse of her old life was Kael's face, twisted with fury and something that looked horribly like regret. Then, Ironfang was gone behind them, and Nightfall Forest swallowed her whole. Cold air knifed into her lungs. Draven ran like the wind was trying to keep up with him. Trees blurred past, trunks silvered by the moon's light, branches clawing at the sky. Nightfall wolves fanned out in a protective V around their alpha, their paws barely whispering over the forest floor. Maera buried her face in the rough fur at the back of his neck, more out of instinct than thought. Every muscle in his body moved with terrible, graceful power beneath her. The heat of the mark at her shoulder had spread down her ribs, lacing through her limbs, burning off the numbness that had threatened to swallow her whole. Her mind scrambled to catch up. Ironfang is behind us. Kael rejected me. Draven claimed me. The thought stuttered. I'm alive. The bond humming between her and the Nightfall Alpha wasn't smooth or easy. It was wild and new, snagging on the jagged edges of the wound Kael had left. But it was there, solid, fierce. Her wolf, shattered moments ago, now pressed against it, sniffing, testing, then curling into its warmth with a shaky, exhausted sort of relief. Not Kael, not the boy she'd built dreams around, but a wolf who had seen her dying in the dirt and said mine in front of the world. That had to mean something. By the time Draven slowed, dawn was a hint of gray at the horizon. Nightfall's main den rose out of the forest, like it had grown there. Instead of one towering stone hall, there were several low, sprawling structures built of dark timber and rock, connected by covered walkways and ringed in heavy pines. Smoke curled from chimneys. Guard posts, subtle, almost invisible, watched from the trees. It felt intentional, like a strategy made into a home. Draven shifted back to human, the moment they passed the main warding stones, catching Maera before she could fall. She'd expected to hit the ground. Instead, she ended up in his arms again, pressed against a chest that was now bare, but for scars and sweat, and faint smudges of Ironfang dust. Her face flushed hot. He didn't look away. "We're home," he said simply. Home. The word hit harder than it should have. Nightfall wasn't hers. Ironfang had never truly felt like hers, but it had been all she knew. She swallowed. "You didn't have to do that. That's the point," his beta muttered, striding past them to bark orders at the arriving wolves. He wasn't going to. And then you fell over and broke his brain. Draven shot Sarah a look that could have stripped bark, then turned back to Maera. "You are exhausted," he said. "You're also still bleeding." His thumb brushed near the mark on her shoulder. The skin there throbbed, heat radiating out in small, insistent waves. It should have felt invasive. It didn't. It felt grounding. "My healers will—" "I'm not breakable," she said, the words snapping out sharper than she'd intended. His brows lifted just a fraction. "Good," he replied. "I don't mate breakable wolves." Heat flooded her cheeks again. He carried her into the main den anyway. The inside was different from Ironfang's stone hall. Warmer. The walls were carved with running wolves and phases of the moon, but there were also shelves of books, stacks of maps, a table in the center already cluttered with current patrol reports. Furs lined the benches. The air smelled of herbs and clean smoke and fur, not stale ale. He took her to a room at the very back, a den within the den. The scent of him strong here. "I'll have a room prepared," she began nervously. "This is your room now, too," he said. Mate, right. That was a thing. He set her down on the bed, the mattress so soft, she sank into it like moss. For a second, she just sat there, fingers digging into the fur blanket, body and brain refusing to agree on how to feel. Free, trapped, safe, stolen. He watched her. The gold in his eyes dimmed a little now, cooled from furious flame to something more assessing, tired. "You can scream," he said, to her utter shock. "If you need to, or throw things, or tell me I'm an idiot. Most of that would be true." She blinked. "You think you're an idiot." "I think," he said slowly, "that I just claimed a stranger in the middle of a sacred rite and dragged her across 3 ridgelines with half a territory as witness. That is either the stupidest move I've ever made or the smartest. Time will tell." A huff of something almost like laughter escaped her. It felt rusty. "Why?" she asked. The word small but sharp. "Not the strategy. You. Why would you take on someone else's ruined bond?" His jaw flexed. He looked for a heartbeat, almost uncertain. Then he shrugged one big shoulder. "Because when he broke you, I heard the goddess scream." He turned to go before she could answer. Voice rougher on the way out. "And because my wolf said if I left you there, he'd never let me sleep again." Sleep came anyway. Maera didn't remember closing her eyes. One moment she was staring at the carvings on the ceiling, counting each notch to keep from thinking. The next, she was surfacing from a heavy, dreamless dark to the faint crackle of a fire. For a few blissful seconds, she didn't remember where she was. The bed was too soft, the air too clean. No Ironfang stink, no low background growl of simmering hostility. Just the scent of pine, smoke, and Draven. Her wolf rolled in the bond, stretching, testing the new connection like a sore muscle. He wasn't in the room, but she could feel him somewhere in the den, tired, alert. His focus narrowed around her like a shield, even when he wasn't consciously thinking about it. She pushed herself upright. Someone had changed her bandage while she slept. The mark at her shoulder still burned, but the rawness had eased. Her dress was folded carefully on a chair. She wore an oversized linen shirt instead, the sleeves rolled sloppily to her elbows. Maera swung her feet to the floor. The door opened before she could stand. A woman stepped in with a tray balanced on one hip, broad-shouldered, hair in tight braids, eyes like a hawk. The Nightfall Beta. "Good," Sarah said, taking her in with one quick sweep. "You're alive." Maera stared. "You sound almost disappointed." Sarah snorted, setting the tray on a small table. "If you died, Draven would be unbearable. He's annoying enough as it is." The tray held broth, bread, and a clay mug that steamed gently. Maera's stomach cramped at the smell, reminding her she hadn't eaten since before the rite. "Eat," Sarah said. "Then we talk." Maera hesitated, then picked up the spoon. The first sip nearly made her moan. Her body had been running on fear and pain for hours. The simple, salty warmth was a revelation. Sarah watched her for a minute, then leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "So, Maera of Ironfang." Maera flinched at the old pack name on her tongue. Sarah's sharp gaze softened by a hair. "Maera of Nightfall," she corrected. "Why in all the goddess's 9 shadows did that idiot boy throw you away?" The question was blunt enough to make Maera choke on her broth. She swallowed hard. "I wasn't enough for them, for an alpha heir who thinks glory is something you shout loud enough," Sarah said dryly. "You're probably too much." Maera shook her head. "I'm not a fighter." "Neither am I," Sarah said. "Not compared to the big brutes who like to show off scars. I plan fights. I end them before they start." She tilted her head. "I saw you looking at the map in Ironfang's hall. You saw the gap at the southern ridge." Maera's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "How did you know?" "Because Theron's daughter doesn't stare at ink for fun." Sarah's gaze sharpened. "We know who your father was. We know how he died." Darius told the story like he'd been saddled with a liability. "Our scout's version sounds different." Heat pricked behind Maera's eyes. She blinked it away, focusing on the carved wolves chasing each other along the wall. "They blamed him," she said quietly, "for the raid, for the losses. I never saw the full reports, but some things didn't add up." Her throat tightened. "After he died, they stopped asking for my numbers, started calling me Mouse instead of Mind." Sarah's lips flattened. "Then they were bigger fools than we thought." She pushed off the wall. "For the record, I argued against Draven dragging you home." That stung more than Maera wanted to admit. She set the spoon down carefully. "Lovely. I was wrong," Sarah said. "Hate that. But there it is. I saw the way you watch the hall. You don't stare at the shoulders of men who mock you. You watch the exits, the weapons racks, the elder's staff. You know where the power in a room actually sits." Her mouth tipped, just barely. "That, Mouse, is a Nightfall trait." Maera's heart kicked hard. "You don't even know me." "We will." Sarah nodded toward the door. "Draven's pacing a groove into the war room floor. Finish that, then come prove I'm right." She left, without waiting for an answer. Maera stared at the door, spoon forgotten. Ironfang had spent 5 years telling her to be small, silent, grateful for scraps. Nightfall's Beta had walked in, insulted her, fed her, and then casually invited her to a war council. Her wolf sat up. "Maybe," it said cautiously, "we didn't fall into a worse prison. Maybe we fell sideways, into a different kind of den." The Nightfall war room smelled like ink, leather, and old tension. Maps covered the main table, some spread flat, others layered and pinned. 3, deep in places, miniature carved wolves marked patrols in enemy forces. Someone had scrawled notes in the margins, cramped handwriting marching between rivers and cliffs. Draven stood at the far side of the table, palms braced on either side of a map, head bowed. The muscles in his back were tight, every line of him drawn, He'd thrown on a dark shirt at some point, but his hair was still damp from a quick wash. Sarah leaned beside him, tracing a route with one finger. "A council will demand you present her," she was saying. "You know that." "I know," Draven replied, voice clipped. "They'll want to examine the bond. We'll have to show them how torn it was when I found it." "How torn you are willing to tell them it was," Sarah said. He huffed. "Council politics were irritating enough before I handed them a scandal on a platter." "You've always had a talent for dramatics," she said. "Why stop now?" Maera hovered in the doorway, suddenly unsure if walking in was the biggest mistake of her life. Draven's head lifted. The bond between them thrummed, that faint invisible thread tightening as his attention snapped toward her. His gaze swept her once, checking for pain, then lingered at her shoulder, satisfaction flickering through the link when he saw the mark clean and healing. "Come in," he said. "No one bites in here without my permission." "Liar," Sarah muttered. "You chomped a counselor yourself last winter." "He was trying to take a territory we just bled for," Draven said. Then, to Maera, in a tone halfway between rueful and resigned, "He got better." Despite herself, the corner of Maera's mouth twitched. She crossed the threshold. The shift in the room's attention was immediate. Two other wolves, one older with a streak of white in his beard, one younger with ink-stained fingers, looked up from their corner of the table. "The claimed," the older said, studying her. Not unkind, not warm either, evaluating. "Maera," Draven corrected. "Of Nightfall." His gaze didn't leave her face. "This is Joran, my uncle and Finn, our quartermaster." Finn lifted a hand in a small wave. Joran inclined his head, eyes sharp. Maera's spine straightened automatically. "Thank you for letting me stay." Draven's brows twitched. "Stay? Mouse, the only way you're leaving is if you decide you want to walk out of here yourself." The casual mention of choice again threw her off harder than yelling would have. She moved closer to the table, eyes drawn to the map at its center. Ironfang territory. Her chest tightened. Ridges she knew by heart. Rivers she'd traced with her father's finger when she was barely tall enough to see the table. Patrol routes inked in Ironfang red. And there, in a darker line, Nightfall's border. Draven watched her, saying nothing. She pointed before she could second-guess herself. "Your western line here." She dragged her fingertip along a wooded ridge. "It looks solid, but Ironfang can slip scouts through this ravine. It's narrow, but the wind cuts strangely. Masks sent for about 20 yards. Sarah's brows shot up. Joran leaned closer. Finn scrambled for a pen. Maera's throat went dry. "They used it once, against Bloodpine. Theron saw it on a raid report. He was impressed." Her voice wobbled on the last word. She swallowed it back down. "Ironfang stopped using it after that. At least, not where we could see. My guess is they're saving it for someone who doesn't know it's there. Like us," Draven said quietly. Maera forced herself to meet his eyes. "If they come for you, they will come clever. They have to, after last night." Something wary flickered in his gaze. "Do you think they will?" She almost laughed. "You stole their scandal. You turned their humiliation into yours. Darius is proud. Kael is proud and stupid. They won't let that stand." Joran grunted. "She's right." "Of course she's right," Sarah said. "It's almost like she was raised by a strategist or something." Draven's mouth curved, just slightly. "Then we plan for it." He slid a clean sheet of parchment into the center of the table and stepped aside. "Show me," he said to Maera. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Ironfang's war room had never said that to her. They'd tolerated her father's lessons, as long as he wrapped them in, "She's just helping me set the markers." And when he was gone, they'd shut the door in her face. Draven cracked it open and gestured her through like it was obvious she belonged there. Maera took a breath. Then she started drawing. Hours slipped past in ink and argument. Nightfall's wolves didn't mind argument. Joran challenged her assumptions. Sarah poked holes in worst-case scenarios. Finn kept interrupting with supply questions and muttered curses about the state of their winter stores. Draven listened. He corrected troop numbers. He added notes about which captains could be trusted to hold a line and which needed someone breathing down their necks. He never dismissed Maera's suggestions out of hand. The longer they worked, the looser her tongue got. "Ironfang favors the obvious," she said, sketching a line across the map. "They like making shows of force. But if Darius believes you'll expect that, he might send Kael in with a smaller, fast unit here, through the ravine I mentioned. A flanking attempt." "So we let them," Draven said. "We cut off their exit, trap them in the bottleneck, bleed them without sacrificing main strength." Finn tapped the map. "We'd need archers on this ridge to make it work, and whoever's down in that ravine better be very sure of their footing." "Brayna's squad," Sarah said. "They live for miserable terrain. They drafted formations, contingency plans, fallback positions. Somewhere between counting arrows and deciding which squads could be pulled from patrol without leaving their own borders vulnerable, the bond between Maera and Draven stopped feeling like a foreign object jammed into a wound. It started feeling right, not easy. The ghost of Kael's rejection still ached, especially when she glanced at the Ironfang markers on the map. But the new bond glowed, warm underneath the bruise, a steady presence at the back of her mind. When they finally broke, Maera's hand ached from writing. Her head spun pleasantly, with numbers and roots. Her body weirdly more relaxed than it had been in years. "We'll refine tomorrow," Draven said. "Council will send their messenger soon enough. Might as well be ready before they stick their noses in." Sarah snorted. "They're going to lose their minds when they realize you stole a broken bond and made it work overnight." Maera stiffened. "Will they?" She licked dry lips. "Can they make you undo it?" 4 sets of eyes turned toward her. Draven's gaze softened by a fraction. "No," she exhaled. "The council can order territory reparations," Joran said. "Demand concessions. Meddle in border agreements. They can't rip a bond apart that the goddess allowed to reform, not without tearing half your soul out to see what's inside. They will want to probe it," Sarah warned. "Ask you how it feels, whether there's residue from the first bond." Heat crawled up Maera's neck. The idea of a semicircle of old wolves peering at the most intimate, painful part of her spirit made her want to bare her teeth. "They can ask," Draven said. His jaw hardened. "What they get in response is my problem, not yours." "You claimed me in front of them all," she said quietly. "That makes me their problem too." His eyes met hers. "Everything that touches you now touches me," he said. "That's how this works." Her wolf pressed into that declaration with a small, startled bloom of pleasure. She looked away quickly. "I'll just go lie down," she muttered, "before I fall over, and you have to carry me like a sack of grain in front of more strangers." "Already did that," Sarah said, grinning. "It was delightful." "You drooled on his shoulder." Maera choked. "I did not." Draven, traitor that he was, smiled. "You did a little." The image of her limp and drooling in his arms was mortifying enough to propel her out of the room. Behind her, their chuckles followed her down the hall. She tried not to let the warmth of it sink too deep. She'd been almost accepted before, almost valued, almost listened to, almost killed. The messenger arrived 3 days later. The Nightfall Den had just started to feel less like a place she'd been smuggled into and more like somewhere she might be allowed to exist, when the scent of foreign magic curled under the doors. Maera felt the ripple of alertness hit the pack through the bond network. Low-level tension, warriors checking weapons out of habit, scouts taking up unseen positions. At the center of it all, Draven's focus sharpened like a blade. She found him in the courtyard, watching as a slim, gray-robed figure stepped through the warding stones. Council courier. The silver thread embroidered along his hood marked him as such. No pack colors, no allegiance, but to the goddess and the bureaucrats who claimed to interpret her will. The courier bowed. Alpha, Draven of Nightfall. Courier, Draven said. You look tired. Council working you like a rented horse again? The man's lips twitched, betraying just enough humanity to crack the image of impersonal authority. They are agitated, he admitted. You've given them reason. He produced a scroll from his satchel, sealed with the High Council's sigil, crescent moon over crossed claws. Formal summons, he said. You and your new mate are ordered to appear within 7 days to answer for the events of the Moonbond Rite at Ironfang. Maera's stomach flipped. Draven took the scroll, broke the seal, scanned it. His expression didn't change, but through the bond, she felt a faint tightening. Of course, he said mildly. Wouldn't want them to miss a chance to rehearse how righteous they are. The courier's gaze slid past him and landed squarely on Maera. She fought the urge to shrink. Maera, he said, and the way he said her name told her he'd been briefed. Daughter of Theron of Ironfang. Maera of Nightfall, Draven corrected, not looking up from the scroll. The courier inclined his head. My apologies. Titles travel slower than gossip. His eyes measured her clinically, coolly, as if she were a particularly interesting puzzle. How does it feel? She blinked. Excuse me? The bond, he said. First to Ironfang's heir, now to Nightfall's Alpha. The council will ask. I am asking now, so they can prepare. He gestured vaguely at her chest. Does it feel whole? She wanted to tell him to go straight to hell. Instead, she forced herself to think. The connection to Kael was a scar now. Faint, ragged, but there. An absence, not an open wound. Draven's bond lay over it, woven through the damaged edges, strong and hot. It feels like something broken that's healing, she said slowly. But the first break happened because he threw it away, not because the goddess did. Maybe you should have the council start their questions there. The courier's brows rose a hair. Draven's power flared with dark amusement. I will relay that sentiment, the courier said. Be at the council hall before the week's end. He turned and left without waiting for a farewell. When the warding stones closed behind him, Draven exhaled. Council, Sarah muttered from the doorway. Nest of snakes sitting on a pile of rules. Maera wrapped her arms around herself, fingers digging into her elbows. They'll want Ironfang there too, won't they? Of course, Joran said, joining them. Can't have a scandal without all the performers. She swallowed. So, I'll have to stand in front of Darius and Kael and tell a room full of alphas why I didn't die when I was supposed to. Something cold slid down her spine. The mark at her shoulder burned, answering her anxiety with a sharp pulse. Draven stepped closer. You'll stand in front of them, he said, and do what you've already done. Tell the truth. I'll handle the rest. You can't just hit a council elder, she muttered. His mouth curved. Not kindly. Not unless they hit first. Through the bond, she felt his wolf pacing, wanting to tear something apart on her behalf. The idea of facing Ironfang again made her stomach knot. But another part of her, smaller, stubborn, wanted it. Wanted Lyra's eyes on her mark. Wanted Darius to see exactly what he'd thrown to the floor. Wanted Kael to understand that calling her weak had not killed her. It had made her dangerous. The High Council Hall sat at the convergence of 4 territories, carved into the side of a cliff that overlooked a crescent lake. Huge, neutral, intentionally intimidating. Maera had only seen sketches. Standing at the foot of the broad stone steps, she realized the sketches hadn't done the place justice. Moonlight pooled in the shallow carvings along the balustrades, turning every etched wolf and tree into something that seemed to move when she wasn't looking straight at it. Warding sigils crawled over the entrance like spider webs made of silver light. Nightfall's delegation drew looks as they climbed. Draven didn't seem to notice or care. His shoulders were square, head high, expression carved from stone. Sarah walked on one side of Maera, Joran on the other, a deliberate bracket of muscle and rank. Ironfang was already inside. Maera smelled them before she saw them, that too familiar mix of smoke, sweat, and unwashed ambition. Her wolf recoiled. The council chamber was a circle. Benches rose in tiers, occupied by alphas and elders from half a dozen neighboring packs. The counselors themselves sat at the far side on slightly higher chairs. Not quite thrones, not quite simple stools, just high enough to annoy everyone equally. Alpha Darius sat to their right, Kael just behind his shoulder. Lyra hovered further back, forced by rank to sit with the lesser wolves. When Maera stepped into the circle beside Draven, several things happened at once. Darius's nostrils flared. His gaze snapped to the mark at her shoulder, then to Draven's hand resting lightly at the small of her back. Fury flared in his aura, thick and choking. Kael's face went bloodless. Lyra made a small, strangled sound that sounded suspiciously like no. Maera kept her chin level. Counselor Wren, the oldest of the 3, cleared his throat. Alpha Draven, Alpha Darius, you stand before this council to explain why the Moonbond Rite at Ironfang turned into a spectacle bordering on sacrilege. Ask him first, Draven said. He started it. The hall's tension spiked. Someone muffled a laugh. Wren sighed like a wolf who'd been expecting exactly this level of maturity. Very well, Alpha Darius. Why did your heir reject the goddess's chosen bond in front of half the region? Darius's jaw clenched. My son has the right to choose a mate who will strengthen our pack, he said. The goddess's will is a guide, not a chain. A low, unhappy murmur rippled through the benches. A few elders stiffened, eyes flashing. Wren's brows arched. You argue the goddess's will is optional? I argue, Darius said, recovering, that the goddess gives us instincts for a reason. Kael's wolf rejected the match. It would have been cruel to both of them to force it. Maera made a quiet, disbelieving noise. Every eye swung to her. Speak, Wren said. Her pulse hammered. Draven's hand at her back didn't move, but the bond between them hummed in silent support. His wolf didn't reject me, she said. His pride did. Kael stiffened. You don't... Quiet, Wren snapped. Maera took a breath. The bond was forming. I felt it. So did he. And he looked not at me, but at the Nightfall delegation, at the other alphas, and decided he didn't want to be seen tied to a strategist's daughter instead of a warrior princess. Her gaze cut briefly to Lyra, who flinched. He called me weak to make himself feel stronger. Kael surged to his feet. You were always hiding in corners, planning battles your father took credit for. She cut in, sharper now, marking ambush routes that saved your patrols. You never saw it because you never looked at the maps you bragged over. You just liked standing on them. A few wolves tried and failed to hide their smirks. Ren held up a hand before Kael could explode. Enough. The moment of rejection is less important than the aftermath. His gaze slid to Draven. Alpha of Nightfall, you admit you claim this wolf. Someone else's half-bound mate. Seconds after that bond was broken. I do, Draven said. Why? Draven held Ren's gaze, unflinchingly. Because leaving her on that floor, with a torn soul, while her pack whispered, wolfless, was an insult to the goddess and a tactical disaster waiting to happen. Tactical, Counselor Merrick echoed, intrigued. Explain. If I hadn't claimed her, Draven said, matter-of-factly, every ambitious alpha in 3 territories would have eventually heard that Ironfang's heir discarded a strategist-blooded wolf with a half-healed bond. They would have come sniffing. Whoever got to her first would hold leverage over both Ironfang and Nightfall. Darius bristled. She is mine. She stopped being yours the moment your son spat on her in the goddess's sight. Draven snapped. You turned her into a prize. I turned her back into a person. The words hung in the air. Maera's throat closed. Ren steepled his fingers. Maera, he said. Step closer. Everything in her screamed no. She stepped anyway. Ren's spiritual presence brushed over her like cold moonlight. It skimmed the scar where the first bond had been, traced the new mark's heat. For a second, she felt naked, exposed in a way that had nothing to do with flesh. Then the pressure receded. Ren exhaled, long and slow. The bond to Ironfang's heir is broken, he said. Not unraveled naturally, torn. The wound is significant. Darius looked away. The bond to Nightfall's alpha is strong, Ren continued. Not ordinary. It's threaded through the scar, stabilizing it. I do not sense coercion or corruption. His gaze flicked to Draven. Whatever else you are, Alpha, you are not a thief of souls. Merrick grimaced, disappointed. He'd clearly wanted more scandal. So, Ren said, we are left with an alpha heir who dared to override the goddess in public, and an alpha who stapled a broken soul back together in a way that might actually be keeping her alive. His eyes swept the chamber. The council will deliberate on the proper reprimand for Ironfang. In the meantime, Maera of Nightfall. He emphasized the new title, not by accident. You will not be forced to return to the pack that rejected you. Do you understand? Maera's knees nearly buckled with relief. Yes. As for Nightfall, Merrick said grudgingly, you will compensate Ironfang for the loss of a potential Luna. Draven snorted. I'll send them a fruit basket. Sarah elbowed him hard in the ribs. Ren pinched the bridge of his nose. We will determine compensation later. He rapped his staff on the stone. This hearing is suspended. Go home. Try not to start a war on the way out. As the chamber dissolved into murmurs, Maera felt Ironfang's eyes on her like claws. She turned deliberately away and walked out beside Draven. For the first time in 5 years, she felt like she was walking toward something instead of away. War didn't wait for council decrees. 2 weeks after the hearing, Ironfang made their move. It started with a missing patrol. Nightfall scouts found the bodies at dawn. 3 wolves lying in a ravine Maera had pointed out on the map. Throats torn, scent masked with crushed juniper and ash. No tracks leading away. No obvious banner left behind. It's Ironfang, Joran said grimly, staring at the scene report. Who else knows that ravine this well? They're hoping we'll overreact, Sarah said. Charge straight at their border and give them grounds to call us aggressors. Draven looked at Maera. She stared at the inked copy of the ravine, at the little marks Finn had added for depth and angle. Her chest felt tight. They're testing you, she said quietly. Testing us, seeing if the council hearing made you cautious. If you'll tuck your tail because they're already under reprimand. And if we don't, Draven asked. Then they'll scream that Nightfall's Alpha is reckless, she said. That your decision to claim me has unbalanced you. They want to make you look like the problem, so no one pays attention to what they're doing. He nodded once. So we show them exactly how unbalanced I'm not. They moved fast. Scouts traced supply lines. Informants in neutral villages passed along whispers. Ironfang warriors spotted traveling in small, fast units near the western ridges. Kael's distinctive scent among them. They're using the ravine again, Maera said, tapping the map. They think you'll avoid it now that you know it's dangerous. So you send your main force somewhere they expect. This pass here, and you put your real teeth here and here. She placed markers. A pincer, Sarah said, eyes narrowing with approval. Trap their flanking party. Cut the head off the snake while the body's still deciding if it's slithering or striking. Who's the head? Joran asked. Kael, Maera said, without hesitation. Darius won't risk himself on a first strike. Not after the council's warning. He'll send his son to earn back face. That's what pride-blind alphas do. Her stomach twisted at saying it out loud. Can you face him? Draven asked, voice low. The question wasn't whether she'd physically survive seeing Kael again. It was whether her wolf would. She let herself think about the last time. The floor, the echoes, the words unworthy and weak. Then she thought about Nightfall's war room. Sarah's barked laughter, Finn's frantic scribbling, Joran's grudging respect. Draven's hand steady at her back in the council hall. Yes, she said, but I won't fight him like a warrior. Her eyes flicked to the ravine sketch. I'll fight him like a mouse. He smiled, sharp and fierce. Good, he said, because mice with maps are the most dangerous kind. The day of the ambush dawned cold and clear. Nightfall moved like a living shadow. Brina's squad slipped into the ravine hours before sunrise, their coats brushed with mud and crushed fern to mask their scent. Archers took positions along the ridges Maera had indicated, bows strung, arrows tipped and waiting. Maera herself crouched behind a screen of brush at the ravine's edge, a communication stone warm in her palm. Draven had wanted her farther back, safe, tucked behind 3 lines of warriors and a hill. She'd refused. I'm not a symbol you leave behind, she'd said. I'm the one who knows how Kael thinks. I have to see him to read him. He'd hated that. The bond had thrummed with his wolf's displeasure. But he'd agreed, grudgingly, on the condition that Sarah and 2 of the best guards in the pack glued themselves to her sides. Now, she waited. The first Ironfang scout appeared mid-morning, a pale shape against the trees, moving cautiously, nose high. He swept the ravine with his gaze, clearly aware of its potential. Then he waved. Kael came into view with a half-dozen hand-picked warriors at his back. He looked older. The last few weeks had carved deeper grooves around his mouth, tightened his shoulders. He wore Ironfang's best armor, every bit of it polished to a shine, as if he thought he could blind Nightfall with reflected ego. Maera's heart thumped. The phantom echo of the old bond twitched. The new one flared hot, Draven's awareness surging toward her through the stone. You all right? Fine, she sent back, forcing her breathing steady. He looked smaller outside the hall. Kael scanned the ravine, nostrils flaring. Maera shrank further behind the brush. "Looks clear," one of his warriors said. Kael hesitated. Pride warred with caution in his posture. "Nightfall won't have the spine to use this again," he said finally. "Council's eyes are on them now. They'll be hugging their precious border." He stepped into the ravine. Brayna's squad held their breath as he and his wolves picked their way over the rocks. "Now," Maera whispered. Arrows hissed down from the ridges, burying themselves in the rocks just ahead of Kael's group. A warning volley, not a killing one. Ironfang wolves scattered for cover. "Ambush!" someone shouted. "You think?" another snapped. Kael snarled. "Hold formation. They're not heavy enough to pin us. We push through." Maera smiled grimly. He was doing exactly what she knew he would, trying to bull his way through apparent danger rather than back out and admit a mistake. "Pull left," she murmured into the stone. "Let them break the line." Nightfall archers shifted fire. Brayna's squad melted away from one side of the ravine, drawing Ironfang forward with a calculated show of retreat. Kael took the bait. He drove his wolves up the exposed slope, teeth bared, eyes bright with the thrill of an unexpected fight he thought he could win. "Now," Maera said again. Sera's grin was audible. "Gladly." Nightfall's main force hit Ironfang's flank like a tidal wave. Kael barely had time to register the new scent before Draven was on him. The two alphas collided in a spray of dirt and fur, snarls vibrating the trees. Power crackled between them, two very different kinds of strength meeting head-on. Maera's wolf surged against her skin, wanting to join. She forced herself to stay focused. "Cut off their exit," she snapped through the stone. "No one gets past the choke point." Nightfall wolves tightened the noose. Ironfang fought hard. Pride-driven or not, they were trained, and desperation made them vicious. But they'd come expecting to surprise a nervous border patrol, not slam into the full weight of Nightfall's teeth. Within minutes, the ravine was a churn of mud, blood, and panting bodies. Maera watched Kael and Draven clash, the ghost ache of the old bond whining in the back of her mind. Kael's eyes met hers once over Draven's shoulder. For a heartbeat, time stretched. There was recognition there, and something raw and ugly. Regret, rage, envy. She wouldn't let herself care. She lifted the stone. "Kael," she called, sending her voice through the ravine with a little push of power. "How does it feel to be the one in the trap this time?" His focus flickered. Draven's teeth closed on his throat. Not killing. Draven was too controlled for that without cause, but hard enough to slam Kael into the dirt and make his wolf go limp in instinctive submission. The rest of Ironfang saw their heir pinned. The fight bled out of them. They didn't kill Kael. Part of Maera wanted them to. The part that remembered stone against her cheek and laughter in her ears, remembered the cold knife twist of "I reject this fated mate." But killing him here would have been cheap, easy. Draven was not cheap or easy. They bound Kael in silvered chains instead, along with his surviving warriors, and marched them back to Nightfall's den. By the time they reached the main hall, the adrenaline had burned off. Pain and exhaustion crept in at the edges. Maera sank onto a bench, hands still shaking, as healers rushed past to tend wounds, and Sera shouted orders to sort prisoners from injured allies. Draven strode in a few minutes later, fur still damp with blood, eyes bright and sharp. The bond between them hummed, pulling her gaze to his without her consent. He crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning her for wounds. "Just tired," she said. "And Done watching idiots almost get themselves killed. His mouth quirked. We did well. We did, she agreed. He hesitated, then offered his hand. It took her a second to realize what he was doing. She'd seen alphas clasp wrists with their lieutenants after a successful raid, slap shoulders, grin bloody grins. She'd never seen one offer his hand to a strategist like it was a victory shared equally. Her fingers slid into his. His grip was warm and strong. The moment their skin touched, the bond pulsed hard enough to steal her breath. Pride, relief, a flash of something that felt dangerously like joy. Not just his, hers. She squeezed back. Movement at the far side of the hall drew their attention. Kael stood between two Nightfall guards, chains glinting at his wrists. He looked like he'd been chewed up and spat out. Lips split, one eye swelling, armor dented. His gaze found Maera. His nostrils flared at the sight of their linked hands. His mouth twisted. You always did like hiding behind someone stronger, he sneered. Maera let go of Draven's hand and stood. She crossed the hall slowly, aware of every eye on them. Hiding, she said. Is that what you think I'm doing? He lifted his chin. What else would you call letting another alpha claim the mate the goddess meant for me? Laughter rippled through the hall. It wasn't kind. She meant to give you a spine, Maera said. You threw it away. Draven picked it up before it rotted. She stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he and the nearest guards could hear. The only reason you're breathing is because killing you here would give Darius something to cry about at the council. I don't need you dead to win. I just need you small. His eyes flashed. You were nothing before, he hissed. Always watching, never acting. Do you really think Nightfall will treat you any better once they get bored of their shiny new scandal? Maera smiled. It felt vicious, freeing. They already have, she said. They let me speak. They listened. They bled for plans I made. When they say I'm theirs, they mean it. Not like you meant it, when you thought it made you look good. Kael's jaw worked. You'll regret this, he said weakly. I already regretted you, she replied. I'm done wasting emotion. She turned her back on him. In Ironfang, that would have been unthinkable. A provocation inviting a knife. In Nightfall, no one moved to exploit it. Draven's gaze met hers as she returned to his side. Something complicated and soft, flickering behind the hard alpha lines. You didn't need me, he said quietly. I needed you not to stop me, she corrected. You did well. For a second, he just stared, as if he'd expected those words to feel like shackles, not wings. Then he huffed out a breath. That might have been a laugh. Careful, strategist. Flattery goes to my wolf's head. Our wolf, hers, answered silently. She swallowed. The battle had been won. Ironfang's heir was in chains. The council would have opinions, but the reality on the ground was simple. Nightfall had proven they weren't weak, reckless, or unbalanced. Now came the harder part. Figuring out what they were together when they weren't putting out fires. The days after the battle were a strange new kind of quiet. Nightfall rebuilt. Wounded wolves healed. Patrols shifted back to normal routes, with a few quiet additions based on Maera's suggestions. The den's energy softened from the sharp edge of war, ready to something steadier. Maera found herself drifting, not unwanted, not ignored, just uncertain where to stand now that her crisis usefulness had ebbed. She spent hours in the library, fingers trailing over spines. Nightfall's collection was broader than Ironfang's had ever bothered with. Treatises on territory law, herb lore, old battle accounts, even a few human books stolen or traded from nearby towns. She read until words blurred, then wandered the outer paths, listening to the forest breathe. Draven gave her space. the bond hummed quietly in the background. Present, steady, no longer a roaring, urgent thing. He checked in through it at odd moments, with little pulses of awareness. "You eaten?" "Yes." "Where are you?" "North Path." "Counting ravens." His presence smoothed out when he knew where she was. His wolf did not like losing track of her in their own territory. She didn't mind the possessiveness as much as she thought she should. Still, distance nestled alongside the new intimacy. She couldn't quite shake the feeling that she was a tool he'd used well in a crisis. Valuable, but still a piece on the board. Old scars whispered lies in familiar voices. She found herself outside the war room one evening, drawn by the murmur of voices inside. She didn't mean to eavesdrop. Not at first. "Can't rely on her forever," Joran was saying. "Strategy is useful, but she's still an unknown. Her loyalty is to the wolves who didn't turn their backs on her." Draven cut in. "Same as anyone's. She's Ironfang by blood." Joran pressed. "Theron's line is the reason half our scouts are still breathing," Sarah snapped. "You saw what she pulled off in that ravine. Give the girl a map, and she might actually make your job easier, old man." "I'm not saying throw her out," Joran said, exasperated. "I'm saying keep your eyes open. You've always used your head first. Now I see you watching her instead of the board. That worries me." Silence. Maera's heart clenched. When Draven spoke again, his voice was low, tired. "She is the board," he said. "Ironfang didn't just give us an asset. They handed us someone who can see angles I can't from where I stand. I'd be an idiot not to. Watch that." "Assets can be lost," Joran said. "Broken. Taken. You're not afraid of that?" "Yes," Draven said simply. "I am." The bond thrummed with that truth. Maera's throat tightened. She should have left then, walked away, given them privacy to pick apart her place in their pack. Instead, she leaned closer to the door, palms sweating against the wood. "I am afraid," Draven continued quietly, "because for the first time in years, I'm not the only mind holding this pack together. If I lose her, I lose more than a sharp pair of eyes. I lose the wolf who reminds me that every line on that map is made of bodies, not just ink." Sarah snorted softly. "You're getting soft in your old age." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I was hard for so long I forgot why we fight." Maera backed away, heart pounding. Asset. He'd used the word. But he'd also said more. He was afraid of losing her, not because of power or council politics, because she changed the way he saw his own responsibilities. Her chest hurt. Old wounds whispered. He didn't say mate. He didn't say love. Asset, asset, asset. Her wolf whispered back, "He's afraid. So are we. That doesn't make what we built fake." She was still arguing with herself when Draven found her. He was leaning against the frame of her doorway when she returned to their room, arms crossed, expression carefully blank. "You heard," he said. Not a question. She froze, then sighed. "I didn't mean to. Mostly." His mouth twitched. "Mostly." She walked past him, fingers automatically straightening the edge of the fur on the bed, just to have something to do. "You called me an asset," she said, keeping her voice level. "I did," he said. "And you're afraid of losing me because it would make your job harder." His jaw flexed. "That's part of it." She turned to face him. "What's the other part?" He hesitated. Draven was not a man who hesitated lightly. He'd thrown himself into sacred bonds and council hearings without blinking. Now, the silence stretched. "The other part," he said finally, "is less tidy." "Try me," she said. He exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. "I have spent most of my life being exactly one thing. The alpha who does whatever it takes to keep Nightfall standing. Make the brutal call. Take the blame. Be the sword that falls, so my wolves don't have to. I know, she said softly. I've seen your maps. When I saw you on that floor, he went on, voice rough. Something ancient moved, not just my wolf. Something older, wilder. It said, if you walk away, you're not a leader. You're a coward. You didn't even know me, she whispered. I knew enough, he said. I knew your pack had failed you. I knew the goddess had been insulted. I knew leaving you there meant accepting that kind of failure as necessary. His eyes met hers, gold burning. I am many things, Maera. Ruthless, stubborn, occasionally stupid. I am not a coward. Heat prickled behind her eyes. So, you claimed me to prove that. At first, he admitted, that, and because my wolf refused to shut up about how you smelled like rain before a battle. Her laugh came out wet. Romantic. It gets worse, he said. Oh? The more you talked in our war room, the more frightened I got. She blinked. You hid that well. He shrugged one shoulder. I've had practice. You said things I should have thought of. You saw routes my eyes skipped. You made me look at my own decisions from angles I'd been too tired to find. That's not something to be afraid of, she said. For me it is, he said quietly, because it meant admitting I can't do this alone anymore, that I don't want to. Her breath caught. This pack has been my whole world, he said. Then you walked in with your two big eyes, and your broken bond, and your ridiculous bravery, and suddenly the maps weren't the only thing in focus. He took a step closer. That makes you an asset, yes. It also makes you a vulnerability, and I hate being vulnerable. She swallowed hard. So do I. They stood there, two wolves who had built entire personalities around not needing anyone, staring at each other like the space between them was a battlefield. The bond pulsed, not with urgency this time, with invitation. Her feet moved first. She closed the distance, heart hammering in her throat. If I'm an asset, she said quietly, then you're a risk, and I'm tired of letting fear write the strategy. His hand came up, hovering near her cheek, but not quite touching. What do you want, Maera? No one had ever asked her that without already expecting an answer. Her wolf knew. To stop being an almost, she whispered. I want to be chosen. The last of his restraint snapped. His hand slid to the back of her neck, fingers threading into her hair, as he tugged her gently but inexorably closer. His mouth met hers. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperate, apologetic, a little bit furious at the world that had made them both so wary. She made a small sound against his lips, his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him, her hands fisted in his shirt, anchoring herself to something finally solid. The bond flared, flooding them both with heat and sensation. Her relief, his hunger, her fear, his fierce, stubborn affection, all tangled together. When they broke apart, they were breathing hard. I choose you, he said, voice rough, not as an asset, not as a trophy from Ironfang's stupidity, as the wolf who walks beside me, as my mate. Tears blurred her vision. Say it again, she whispered. His mouth curved. My mate, he repeated, softer now. Mine, if you'll have me. She laughed, choked and shaky. Fine, she said, but only because your maps are a disaster without me. He huffed out a startled laugh and pulled her back in. Fear didn't vanish. It settled into the background, like any risk a strategist accepted, acknowledged, measured, outweighed by the possible gain. They were both advantages and vulnerabilities now. They would live with that. Together. Peace was never perfect. Ironfang didn't vanish after one lost ambush. and a humiliated air. Darius bared his teeth at the council, railing about Nightfall aggression. The council bared theirs right back, waving the reports that said, Ironfang wolves in Nightfall ravine, Ironfang claws in Nightfall throats. In the end, Ironfang lost more than pride. They lost land. The council redrew the border lines, nudging them in Nightfall's favor, as compensation for the unprovoked attack and the insult of the right. Darius had to sign the agreement with a pen that shook. Maera read the full report when it came. Her old Alpha's signature looked smaller than she remembered. It didn't feel like victory, exactly. Just justice tilted halfway into place. Life in Nightfall settled into a new rhythm. Maera split her days between the war room and the outer paths. She walked the land she helped defend. Let her wolf run under open sky more often, learning every dip and rise of Nightfall territory, the way she'd once memorized Ironfangs. She and Sarah developed a nasty habit of finishing each other's tactical sentences. Finn thrived under the extra structure she brought to supply lines. He also started labeling food stores with insulting notes when warriors forgot to report their requisitions. If you eat it, I need to know it's gone, you fur-brained lunatics. Draven stopped pretending not to know when she slipped into his den late at night with new ideas, or when he slipped into hers with old fears. They argued a lot about which borders could be trusted, about how much to trade with human settlements, about whether to send a representative to a council session that would mostly involve old wolves yelling at each other. They also learned the hard way that the bond didn't care whether they were mid-fight or mid-kiss. Emotion was emotion. It leaked. Maera caught flashes of his childhood sometimes, running with a pack half the size of Nightfall's current strength, his father's weary eyes. The moment he'd realized he'd outgrown taking orders, well before he'd been given the right to give them. Draven saw moments of Theron through her, large hands guiding hers on a quill. The heavy silence after he'd left for that last raid, Ele's tear-streaked face at the news. They didn't talk about Kael. Not much. He remained a prisoner, while the council debated what to do with an heir who had insulted the goddess, failed in battle, and yet was still technically in line for an alpha seat. My bet is they exile him somewhere out of the way, Sarah said one afternoon, sharpening a knife. Stick him in a border outpost in a quiet territory, and hope he doesn't breed more stupidity. Exile might be kinder than he deserves, Maera said quietly. You want him dead? Sarah asked. Maera thought about it. No, she said eventually. I want him to live long enough to realize he's not the main character of every story. Sarah barked a laugh. Cruel, strategic, Maera said. They let it go at that. The threat from Ironfang dwindled, but never disappeared entirely. Pride-hurt wolves always probed boundaries. Nightfall remained ready, but for the first time in her life, Maera's days weren't defined solely by fear. They were defined by choice. The first snow of winter fell the night the goddess came to her dreams. Maera woke with frost along her lashes and the taste of starlight on her tongue. She sat up in bed, heart racing. Draven shifted beside her, one arm automatically tightening around her waist. What is it? He muttered, half asleep. I saw her, Maera whispered, not entirely sure how to put it into words. The moon. He blinked awake, gold eyes sharpening. Start from the beginning. She did. The dream had been vivid in a way normal dreams weren't. She'd been standing in the ravine where they'd trapped Kael, but the rocks had glowed faintly silver, every trickle of water reflecting a sky full of too many stars. A wolf made of light had sat on the far ledge, watching her, Not huge and terrifying, as some stories painted the goddess, but lean, sharp, curious. "You're late," the wolf had said, voice like wind over snow. "Late for what?" Maera had asked. "For realizing you were never half of anything," the goddess had said. "You were always whole. He was just a poor fit." "Kael," Maera had asked. "All of them," the goddess had said, eyes bright. "The ones who told you you were small. My bonds are not leashes. They are invitations. When one is refused, I don't weep. I turn the path." "And you turned mine to nightfall," Maera had said. "I nudged," the goddess had replied. "You walked. She'd flicked an ear, indicating Draven on some level. "Leaped. It was entertaining." "Is that all we are to you?" Maera had asked, anger and awe twisting together. "Entertainment." The goddess had huffed a laugh. "Little strategist," she'd said, "you fight so hard to find patterns in chaos. Here is one for free. I care more for wolves who choose each other than for those who obey blindly. You and your shadow-hearted mate defied a narrative. I approve. Then why do I still feel the scar?" Maera had asked, pressing a hand to her chest. "Because scars are how you remember where not to stand again," the goddess had said simply. "They are not punishments. They're maps." Maera had frowned. "Maps of what?" "Of who you were," the goddess had said. "So you can see how far you've walked." Then she'd stood, light rippling. "Tell your Alpha. This," she'd added, amusement curling through her voice. "If he ever tries to call what you are to him an asset again, I will personally turn his maps upside down for a week." Maera had choked on a laugh. "I'll mention it," she'd said. The wolf had smiled, teeth like crescent moons. "Good," she'd said. "Walk well, little whole one." The dream dissolved into falling snow. Now, Maera traced the mark on her shoulder, fingers brushing the faint raised skin. "She said I was whole," she murmured. "Not half, not broken, whole." Draven's expression softened in the dim light. "You always were," he said. "Took us both too long to see it." "And she threatened you?" Maera added, lips twitching. "Something about your maps." He grimaced. "Of course she did. She doesn't like you calling me an asset." "I don't either," he said. "Not anymore." He pulled her back down, tucking her against his chest. "Go back to sleep," he murmured into her hair. "Dream of less terrifying things, like council paperwork." She snorted, but when she closed her eyes, the scar on her spirit felt a little lighter. Not gone, but integrated. A line on the map, not the whole terrain. Spring came, as it stubbornly always did. Snow melted from the ravines. Rivers swelled. The nightfall den shook off winter's weight with a series of long, chaotic days. Repairs to outer walls, restocking of larders, endless assessments of which young wolves had grown into their paws, enough to start proper training. Maera stood at the edge of the training field one morning, watching a pack of adolescents try to coordinate a mock patrol. "Too tight a formation," she muttered. Finn, beside her, nodded. "First arrow volley, and half of them are tripping over the other half." Maera cupped her hands around her mouth. "Spread your line. If you can touch each other with your tails, you're too close." One of the youngsters glanced back, rolled his eyes, then remembered who she was, flushed, and immediately widened the gap between him and his neighbor. Sarah laughed. "You're terrifying," she said. "I'm practical," Maera said. "Also, I really like them alive." She'd resisted taking an official instructor role. The idea of molding young wolves made her throat tight with old memories of Theron's lessons. But they'd started coming to her anyway, creeping into the war room with wide eyes and questions about how she'd predicted Ironfang's moves. "Do you see the future?" a tiny omega had whispered once. No, Maera had said. I just pay attention to who refuses to listen. Now, watching them stumble and correct, she felt something warm and fierce curl in her chest. This was what they'd fought for. Not territory lines on paper, not council grudges. Wolves learning how not to die. A familiar presence slid up beside her. Draven rested his hand at the small of her back. Fingers, splaying casually. The bond hummed, content. You're terrifying, he echoed Sarah's earlier remark. You like it, Maera said. I do, he agreed. They watched in companionable silence for a moment. Then he cleared his throat. There's something we should discuss, he said. Her stomach flipped. That sounds ominous. It's only partially terrifying, he said. I've been talking with the elders about formalizing your title. She blinked. I have a title. Several. All very insulting, I'm sure. Besides strategist and mate who steals my blankets, he said. Nightfall hasn't had a Luna in a very long time. The last Alpha preferred less permanent companionship. Maera grimaced. Charming. The pack's been treating you like one regardless, Draven said. They come to you with disputes. They listen when you scold them. They bring you meat when they think I'm working you too hard. They bring meat. You don't notice because you eat it, he said. Point is, I can keep pretending you're just the woman who shares my bed and rewrites my maps. Or we can call you what you are. Her mouth went dry. Luna, if you want it, he said. I won't stick you with a title you don't choose. Her first instinct was to say no. Titles had been weapons in Ironfang's hall. Tools to box her in, mock her. Remind her she wasn't what she'd hoped. But this wasn't Ironfang. This was Nightfall, where she'd been strategist before anyone had called her such, where respect had come from work, not lineage. Say it, she said quietly, so I can hear how it sounds. He turned her gently to face him. Luna Maera of Nightfall, he said. Her wolf preened. It sounds, she swallowed. Right. So? He asked. She took a breath. Then I'll take it. On one condition. His brows rose. Only one. Don't ever stop arguing with me in the war room, she said. I don't want a title that means Alpha's ornament. I want one that means thorn in his paw, in front of witnesses. He laughed, low and delighted. Done, he said. The elders will hate it. They'll love you. They announced it that evening. The pack howled as one, voices rising around her, through her, into the sky. Maera stood beside Draven at the head of the den, heart pounding, listening to wolves call her Luna without a trace of derision. Her scar ached faintly. Her new bond burned bright. She had stood on stone once and believed her worth depended on someone else naming it. Now she stood on wood, worn smooth by Nightfall's paws, and knew better. She hadn't been chosen in a circle under the moon. She'd chosen herself. The goddess, apparently, approved. Years later, there were still nights when ghosts came knocking. On those nights, Maera would wake with the taste of Ironfang's smoke in her mouth, and Kael's voice echoing in her ears, weak, unworthy. She would lie there, heartbeat racing, staring at the carved wolves on the ceiling. Draven would eventually mutter something about too much thinking and drag her back against his chest until the bond's steady warmth drowned out the old chill. You're not there, he'd grumble into her hair. You're here, with me, with wolves who'd put anyone calling you weak through a wall. I can put them through a wall myself, she'd murmur. Exactly, he'd say. One of those nights, a small body wriggled between them. Can't sleep, a sleepy voice mumbled. Maera shifted to make room, blinking down at the source. Terran, their son, dark-haired, bright-eyed, stubborn as both of them. He smelled like grass and ink. He'd spent most of the day helping Finn with inventory and then sneaking out to pester Sarah about knife techniques. Nightfall's bad habits were rubbing off on him. "What's in your head?" Maera asked softly, stroking his hair. He yawned. "Dreamt the moon fell." "Did she?" Maera asked. He shook his head against her shoulder. "She just moved, like she was looking for something." "What do you think she was looking for?" Draven asked, voice rumbling behind them. Terran screwed up his face in serious thought. "Maybe. New wolves. Who got lost?" Maera's chest tightened. "They're easier to find if someone's howling for them," she said. "I think she likes that." Terran nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. "Will she ever take you away?" he asked suddenly. "Like Ironfang tried?" Maera and Draven exchanged a look over his head. "No," Draven said firmly. "Ironfang tried to throw your mother away. The moon pushed her somewhere better. If anyone tries that again, we'll bite them." Terran giggled. "Both of you?" "All of us," Sarah said from the doorway. Maera hadn't heard her arrive. But of course, Sarah had been lurking. Beta instincts never slept. "Sleep, pup," Sarah said. "We've got you." Terran snuggled deeper between his parents, reassured. Maera lay awake a few minutes longer, listening to his breathing, even out, to Draven's heart slow against her back. She thought of Theron, of Ely, of the girl who'd stood in Ironfang's hall, staring at a map she wasn't allowed to touch, of the woman who'd stood in Nightfall's war room, ink on her fingers, and an Alpha at her side who actually listened. Her scar pulsed once, then quieted. She didn't forgive Kael or Darius. Forgiveness wasn't a requirement for peace. What she did do, on nights like this, was whisper a thank you to the goddess. Not for their cruelty, for the path that had opened when they showed her exactly who they were. For the Alpha who had seen her on the floor and refused to leave her there. For the pack that had turned Little Mouse into Luna and meant it. For the simple, ridiculous miracle of lying between her mate and her son, in a den that smelled like home. Outside, somewhere high over Nightfall Forest, the moon sailed through a clear sky. If she canted her head just right, Maera could almost hear the goddess laugh. "You walked well," the goddess seemed to say. Maera smiled into the dark. "I'll keep doing it," she whispered back. "With him, with them, with me." The bond pulsed. 2 wolves' hearts and 1 small cub's. Steady as a drumbeat. Whole. At last. The end. If you enjoyed this Rejected Mate, Second Chance Alpha romance, hit like, drop a comment about your favorite moment, and subscribe for more full-length shifter love stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next Savage Alpha, Betrayed Mate, or Goddess Twisted Destiny I drop on the channel.